Hello, everybody. Um, Sorry for my tardiness. I was a bit out of sorts. I was trying to get everything cleaned up and ready before the live stream, and I lost track of the time. So I hope you forgive me for that. Um, I just want to say that I have been feeling a little bit under the weather lately. I have a bit of a upper respiratory sickness that's been going around my area. It's not the coof. It's not. It's nothing serious. But if I have to suddenly mute myself or or something like that, that means I'm probably trying to blow my nose or cough or something like that. So I hope you guys. I hope you guys are a little patient with me on that front. Uh, I'm just going to sit here for a bit and wait for everybody to come in. But while I do that, I want to talk a little bit about what I've been doing lately. So, um, with the holidays, with Christmas just around the corner, and the holidays, and with the little sickness that I've acquired, I haven't. My work has been slowed lately. This is why you probably haven't seen me be very active on my YouTube channel lately. Uh, but I am slowly but surely working on my technology video, and I'm planning on getting Dave the Distributist, convincing him to host the video on his channel, hopefully to get some of his subscribers to come onto my channel and give my channel a chance. Sorry, a chance. By the way, this video is I've extended an open invitation to anybody on Discord or in my Telegram. If any of you want to come on this channel, uh, please right now for this video, please DM me. Um, yeah, I was going to have Elliot on as a guest as we did this, but he's a bit busy today, so he couldn't come. It was sort of a last minute, so I I understand that he why, but go and subscribe to his channel anyway. He makes some very good content, especially recently. His recent videos are very good. Um, yeah. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about this. So I have this nice comment here. Thank you for this. I've grown so ill of seeing libertarianism being promoted by Catholics. And you know the ones that are libertarians who promote Catholicism, people like Tom Woods and so on. I understand a lot of them use this kind of sophistry, use this it, they use this kind of that they use proof texting from the Bible or proof texting from the magisterium to try and make it sound like libertarianism and Catholicism are compatible when they really aren't. Uh, Mainly because libertarianism is sort of, well, I'm going to get into that, but basically, libertarianism has a very warped view of morality that is incompatible with the Christian view of morality. Um, But that said, there's nothing wrong as with you as a Catholic if you support less state intervention in the it's less state. There's nothing. Oh, there's a great question here. Why would a Christian shill libertarianism? Well, a lot of Christians are against state intervention. A lot of Christians are against this kind of coerciveness by a centralized authority, forcing people to do all kinds of crazy things, especially nowadays when you see uh, you see things like vaccine mandates. A lot of Christians don't like those. Um, also see a lot of, well, Christianity has long considered the consent of the person, a person's consent, to be very important. This is why Christians are against forcing people to become Catholic. Catholicism does not accept coerced, forced conversions. You know, conversion at gunpoint. They do not accept that. Unlike Islam. uh, so so there is a bit of an overlap there. The problem is the libertarians take things way too far, and to the point of ridiculousness, as we'll see here. Um, Now, keep in mind that not every libertarian is going to agree with the messages that that I'm going to be playing, but as I understand them, consistent libertarian principles cannot find a moral fault with what these particular libertarians believe in. All right. If you are a libertarian and you are consistent in your libertarianism, you will not be able to find a fault in what these libertarians say in this video that I'm going to be responding to. But first, some context. So this video is called whoops. This video is called the case against the case for Ebenezer Scrooge, and or I think it's called the case for Ebenezer Scrooge or the defense of Ebenezer Scrooge. Um, and it's this video that tries to defend the character of Ebenezer Scrooge as he exists, as he was at the beginning of A Christmas Carol, when he was that crotchety miser who um, said "Bah humbug" to Christmas and told people that it'd be better if all the poor people starved in the streets to decrease the surplus population. Yeah, they're defending that guy. Why you would try to defend that guy, we can speculate. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. It'd be like on a rhetorical level, it's kind of ridiculous. It'd be like me trying to defend the um, the Catholic execution of the Cathars during the Albigensian Crusade. Could I defend that? Maybe, but should I though? Is the question. It's such a rhetorically weak position that I don't understand why they would do it. I mean, well, I can think of a few reasons why, but we'll get into them later on. So I want to let you guys come in and see if there's anybody there who wants to join, and if there's anybody who wants to join, I will let them. Uh, there doesn't seem to be anybody DMing me, so that's all right. So maybe we can play this, right? So this is the case for Ebenezer Scrooge. It's written as a sort of courtroom drama. like the author of this piece sets of himself up as a kind of, excuse me, as a kind of defense attorney in favor of his client, and he is trying to um, he's trying to defend his client while attacking the evil moral busybodies and Charles Dickens himself for for going after Scrooge in this way, which is, it's sort of a ridiculous setup. I mean, you're defending a character from the author of the work. What is that even? I don't even know. No, anyway, I'm going to play this, and I'm going to pause it at certain moments and give my own commentary. So hope you enjoy this as much as I will. I've been looking forward to this, actually. I've been wanting to do a response to this particular video for years now, and I finally get the chance to do it, and I'm so happy for that.
May it please.
Hey, so those of you in the audience, can you hear can you hear the video? This is my first time doing StreamYard or video share. So I wanted to I want to know if you can hear the video.
Please the court, and frankly, even if it doesn't please the court. Since 1843, when A Christmas Carol was first published, we have witnessed a thoroughly one-sided treatment of my client, Ebenezer Scrooge, at the hands of the prosecution, as represented by the author, Charles Dickens.
Again, you are trying to defend a character, a character in a novel who you will go on to claim is a quote unquote caricature. You're trying to defend an author's caricature from the author. Why you would do this, I have no idea. But continue.
On the basis of emotionally riddled allegations, coupled with pure economic ignorance, we have been asked to find Mr. Scrooge guilty of the most ill-defined wrongdoings. Most of us have been dissuaded from even imagining the possibility of a defence for a man like Scrooge. Not unlike the allegations in a child abuse case, many may be inclined to respond, what kind of defence could be made of a man like that? What would you expect someone who had done such a horrible deed to say? Indeed, in this age of political correctness and tabloid thinking, some might even say that the more atrocious the allegations, the less evidence is needed to sustain the charges, and the greater the burden upon the defendant to refute and disprove them. From the outset, Mr. Dickens engages in a subtle form of vilification by giving my client a pejorative name: Scrooge. The name seems designed to evoke prejudice, animosity, and revulsion in the mind of the reader, so that they will be predisposed to support any case against the man, no matter how ill-founded. Compare Ebenezer Scrooge to other more wholesome names chosen by Dickens: David Copperfield, Nicholas Nickleby, Mr. Micawber, Fezziwig, and so on.
This author, the person doing this, I wonder if he knows that Ebenezer Scrooge is redeemed at the end of Charles Dickens' novel. That Scrooge, throughout the novel, while we're introduced to him in a very unflattering light, we come to know him throughout the novel and see that he has a very tragic backstory, that he's lived a very unhappy life, that he's miserable and lonely, and that all he wants is all he really wants is happiness, a chance at human happiness, which is the same as everybody else. And at the end of the novel, he turns over a new leaf and becomes a well beloved man throughout his community, a man of the people. There's so I kind of object to this premise at the start, that Scrooge is someone we're meant to despise. Certainly, while he this demonstrates some despicable behavior at the outset, I think the overall novel, it wants us to sympathize with him and to see him as a human, as a person, with virtues and vices. And but the person writing this, like all the libertarian pieces that try to defend Scrooge's behavior, they have to write. They have to make this out to be that Charles Dickens wrote Scrooge as a one note caricature rather than a dynamic character with his own psychology and reasons for being, and a rather complex protagonist overall. Um, it's the Christmas Carol is a story of redemption. It's a story of a man who is unhappy and, mired in sin, discovering the virtues associated with Christmas: liberality, generosity, charity, goodwill to men in general. All these great virtues, he discovers them, and he go, and then he is and then he starts practicing them and becoming happier for it. And what it takes is basically an act of God, which we'll get into later on in this stream. Okay, I'll play this.
I hope that you, members of the jury, are sophisticated enough to resist such an apparent ad hominem attack against my client.
Lol, the name is an ad hominem. Okay.
What is the bill of particulars with which my client is charged? Pay close attention to Mr. Dickens's allegations. His case comes down to just 2 points. 1, my client has managed to become very rich. And 2, he insists on keeping his money for himself. That's it. That is the essence of his alleged wrongdoing. Taking my client as the miserable fellow Dickens has presented him as, let me be the first to admit that if Ebenezer's obsession with materialistic pursuits rendered him an unhappy person, and were it the purposes of his detractors to help extricate him from his self-imposed miseries, and to restore him to that state of happiness and innocence so common to most of us in our childhood years, no one would be happier than I.
Liar. Okay. Liar. Okay, this is the problem here. Uh, he, uh, the author is going to go on and claim that the Charles Dickens is somehow doing something evil to Scrooge, and he's going to go on to claim that Charles Dickens is sending these ghosts to haunt Scrooge's dreams, and this is somehow a bad thing. And it's an inherently ridiculous piece, but I think this is a problem more with the way the author has presented his quote unquote case or argument than it is a problem of the argument itself, but the argument itself is just terrible because, as we'll see, he makes some pretty interesting remarks.
But it is not my client's happiness that the prosecution endeavours to obtain, but his money.
Yep, it's oh, here we go. Charles Dickens, the socialist, Marxist thief.
The case against Ebenezer Scrooge is nothing more than a well orchestrated, vicious conspiracy to extort from my client as much of his money as can be acquired through terror, threats of his death, and other appeals to fear. The
Appeals to fear. Appeals to fear. Yes, because Charles, the now this is a very interesting point that I really do want to look at. I'm trying not to mock the libertarians in question, even if they're making it very difficult. Um, sorry, but they are making it pretty difficult for me not to just mock them, because one of the things that they're doing here is they're trying they're trying to basically twist what happens in the actual novel. So what actually happens in the novel, in the Christmas Carol, cannot be understood unless you understand the very Christianness, the Christian ideas embedded within the novel. Some adaptations of Christmas Carol make them explicit, but let me make it clear to you. The at the very end, in one of the last chapters, when we're talking when Scrooge is seeing the visions of what is of Christmases yet to come, uh, he is faced with his mortality. And let's be clear here. Um, Scrooge, he's an old man. He might not last another winter. So of course, mortality is going to be very much on his mind. And the and mortality is something that he will have to grapple with. And it's a very Christian. There's a very Christian idea behind this. The idea of memento mori. Remember, we have to die. That our life in this world is limited. Uh, what We might have eternal life in heaven, but on this world, our life is limited, and and the finiteness, the limitedness of this life, the finite nature of this life, is why building up riches endlessly is not wise. It's actually an exercise because it's an exercise in futility. You build up all these riches in this life, and what happens when you die? They all just sit there, and then they're devoured by moths. Basically, they're eaten by rats and moths. All the grain in your barn eaten by moths and rats. Sorry if I keep repeating myself, but ba- that is the central point that this libertarian author does not seem to understand. And so when he says that that they are trying to extort his client, all the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come was trying to show Scrooge is, yes, what is likely to happen if you if you continue on this path, is you will die, you will leave behind all of your wealth, and it will go to uh, these kinds of thieves and vultures and scavengers, and everyone around you will be miserable, right? That's what he's trying to do. Uh, and some adaptations also make it clear that if Scrooge continues on the path, he's likely to go to hell. This is implicit in the novel with the fate with Marley at the the ghost of Marley at the beginning, telling him that uh, the Scrooge has his chains, and that that he's forging, and that when he dies, those chains will be visible, and he will be cursed to wander the earth like Marley does. Um, but there are adaptations of A Christmas Carol, movie adaptations that I've seen, where Scrooge is explicitly shown to be destined to go to hell because of his wickedness. And you might say, oh, well, he doesn't deserve this. What does he do? All he is kind of mean. But God doesn't judge you simply off of your actions, but on the state of your soul. All right? Your Scrooge's very soul is wicked, and it takes a divine act from God, the sending the ghost of Marley, and then and then the ghost of Christmas past, present, and yet to come, uh, in order to save him. That's the that's the idea of Christianity. But I'm going to let this guy continue.
The only happiness that ensued to my client from this campaign arose from the ultimate cessation of terror inflicted upon him.
Not true, okay? That terror, quote unquote, that was inflicted upon him by reminding him of of warning him of the consequences of his own actions. That's what the ghost of Christmas yet to come was doing, warning Scrooge of the consequences of his own actions. All right, if that hadn't happened, then Scrooge would not uh, would not have gained the happiness he did later. It's only through being afraid of hell that you gain the happiness of heaven.
In addition to extortion, the conspirators against my client are guilty of such torts as intentional infliction of emotional distress, libel and slander, trespass, assault, malicious prosecution, battery, nuisance, and false imprisonment.
They're ghosts sending bad dreams. How never mind. I'm going to continue.
For this reason, my client may elect to bring his own suit, but for now let us focus upon his defence to this action. As we do so, pay particular attention to the utter contradiction underlying Dickens's case. My client is charged with being a greedy, money-hungry scoundrel, and yet it is the conspirators against him who will resort to criminal means to obtain his money to fuel their own greed.
Yes, the greed of Charles Dickens, hoping to gain, and the greed of Charles Dickens and the ghosts of Christmas, hoping to gain Scrooge's money, even though he's a fictional character. Again, this is a very bad way to set up the argument, but he's going to continue.
Scrooge, unlike his antagonists, earned his money in the marketplace by satisfying the demands of customers and clients who continue to do business with him.
Did he do so with Christian charity? Did he do? I mean, yes, you could say that he did so legally. I'm going to grant the libertarian here that he did everything legally, but uh, did it? I mean, there are a lot of things that are legal that a Christian would find immoral, like usury. But let's continue.
and did not, as far as we are told, resort to terror or threats of death to get it. It is instructive that Dickens tells
Again, it's not it's not as though the Christmas ghost of Christmas yet to come is going to kill Scrooge. All he did was show Scrooge a possible future, a future that is likely to happen should Scrooge not change his ways. But let's continue.
us virtually nothing about the nature of Ebenezer's business. We are told that he is something of a banker or financier, but we are told nothing about the nature of his investments. He has presumably been responsible for financing many successful enterprises over the years, which have not only benefited the rest of the community in terms of the goods and services they provide, but afford employment to countless individuals. For all
Really, employment to countless individuals. I mean, Bob Cratchit is the only person we see in Scrooge's employ. But let's just let's put that aside. Maybe he employed several different people over the years. I mean, that's likely. I mean, let's think about it for a moment. What Scrooge has been shown to do in various adaptations is he basically loans out money, and if you do not uh, pay back the money, then he will take whatever he can as collateral, no matter what you it is, and he probably will do it with interest because usury. I think usury was legal back in Victorian England. So, I mean, that is actually immoral from a Christian view to look to just use these kinds of lending practices as an excuse to just take and take and take and take. That is considered that's called usury. That is a mortal sin in the Christian tradition. Um, you're not supposed to do that. And but of course, a libertarian is perfectly fine with that. From the libertarian perspective, since there's no coercion involved, since they signed that contract, never mind whether the contract they signed was just in itself. Oh no, every contract is just so long as both parties consent in some kind of legalistic way. But let's continue.
we know, Scrooge may have provided capital for researchers seeking a cure for the very ailment from which Tiny Tim suffers.
Oh man, wouldn't that have been nice? I kind of doubt that, considering, I mean, he at the beginning of the novel, when the when these two gentlemen come at his door and ask him for charity, Christmas charity, Scrooge could have said, "Well, I donate money to this and this society. I give my money to I lend my money to such and such people." Uh, does Scrooge say that? No. You know what he does say? Oh, I pay my taxes, and that goes to some welfare plan. And he says that's my substitute for charity. And any libertarian whose worth is salt can tell you that paying taxes to fund a welfare program is not charity, because charity has to be of your own will. Taxes are not of your own will. It's something, it's a duty that's imposed on you. Now, libertarians are wrong to say that this duty is imposed on you unjustly. Taxation isn't theft, but it is something imposed on you as a matter of justice rather than something you freely do as a matter of charity. But let's continue.
It would seem to be beneath Comrade Dickens's sensibilities to ask what good Scrooge's investments have.
There we go. Comrade Dickens. You see how he snuck that in? See, this is the kind of double standards there. Anybody who disagrees with the libertarian is a communist. So we're going to sneak comrade in there. Uh, and yet he complains that Dickens named his character Scrooge as an ad hominem. Let's continue.
Done, or care about the answer, preferring to focus upon the fact that Scrooge has profited from his sound business decision-making.
Sound business decision-making. Yeah, again, it's usury. What Scrooge is doing is he's lending to people at interest. And if they can't pay all the debt, he collects on the collateral. This is something that happens to banks everywhere nowadays. And it's very bad, and especially if you can't pay it back. But let's continue.
If we are to understand the essence of the case against my client, we must inquire into the nature of the collectivist thinking that produced it. In
Collectivist thinking, here we go.
matters of economics, such people believe that wealth is simply a given, something that has come into existence in mysterious ways and in a fixed amount that has somehow managed to get into the hands of a few people through presumed and unspecified acts of dishonesty, exploitation, and unscrupulousness.
That's a straw man if we've ever heard it. Christianity is not anti-wealth. It is, however, it does require you to use your wealth in a particular way. Okay, it's not that. Even if here's the thing though, even if Scrooge hadn't gained his money through usury, even if he did it all through moral means, he still has a moral duty to use that money in a way a way that's better than what he's doing. He can't just use all that money up for himself. That would be immoral. He has to use it in a way that's pro-social, in a way that's charitable, in a way that in a way that's very liberal, because that's how because the that is the purpose of wealth in general. St. Thomas Aquinas talked about this. He did when he in his defense of private property. He said that while ownership and use, while ownership, uh, 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 while ownership of property should be private, the use of the property should be social. And what that means is, although he's not against private ownership, he understands that the purpose of people owning their own private property is so that you could benefit the community as a whole rather than just yourself. And Scrooge, he is not benefiting the community as a whole. In fact, he's a very miserable person. He, any benefit he provides to the community is purely motivated by his desire for more money. And why does he want more money? Well, it actually says why in the novel, that the reason why he wants more money is that he's afraid of becoming impoverished. and he's afraid that if he doesn't have enough money, then he will somehow become impoverished. Now, there's no real reason why he should have this fear. This fear is totally irrational, but that's his fear. That's his fear. And I mean, if you think about it, it's kind of ridiculous. This is a man who spent his entire life pursuing money. He's saved up a whole lot of it. He rarely spends any of it on himself. He rarely spends any of it on others. So, and he doesn't have any heirs. So when he dies, that money is just all going to be there, and nope, and it was all waste. No wonder he's miserable.
Dickens expresses the idea central to all collectivist thinking, that presumes individual self-interest to be a source of social misery.
It is. It literally is. If you are the if you are a person whose highest goal is your own uh, self-interest above the good of everybody else, you are not only will not only is that evil, it will also make you unhappy because human beings are social animals. We are meant to help one another. That is the key to our happiness. If we go around making other people miserable, then we'll be miserable too. That's just how humans are as social animals. And the libertarian doesn't want to admit that. And that's one of the main reasons why libertarianism and liberalism in general is so contrary to Christianity, because it denies this social view of human nature. This isn't to say that we are all just some collectivist Borg, that all the individuals and their individual good does not matter. Rather, what that is to say that the common good is a part of our individual good. That in order for us to be fulfilled, we also have to contribute to society.
Rather than the font of human well-being. That the pursuit of self-interest can generate good for others as an unintended consequence was far too complicated a concept for Dickens's simplistic, fragmented mind.
Ah, yes. Insulting Charles Dickens for his simplistic and fragmented mind. What a maroon. Like, I'm sorry. It's just kind of, this is a very childish view of the world to think that everybody who disagrees with you is just this giant idiot who has never really considered anything outside of it. And if only if only Charles Dickens knew of economics as a science, would he be enlightened to join our libertarian cause? Well, sorry to say, but your economics has implicit within it some very sordid moral views that any sane person would reject. But I'm just going to let it play for a bit.
To all collectivists, including Dickens, the idea that more wealth could be created never manages to invade their imaginations. To them,
That's a straw man.
the only question is how is this fixed body of wealth to be most fairly redistributed?
Well, I mean, how is it supposed to be fairly redistributed? I mean, even if, I mean, let's, uh, I mean, you're right. The libertarians are right that wealth is always something that's created. It's not something fixed. But that doesn't get rid of the question of distribution. Who should the wealth go to? Libertarians think that libertarians have their answer. They think that if you make the wealth in a voluntary way, you just and in their understanding of voluntary, which includes things like exploitative practices like usury, um, then you should just keep it. You can do whatever you want with it so long as it doesn't harm others. Of course, what is harm or not, what is or isn't harm, is going to depend on your definition of what is or isn't good for a person. And then, by the Christian standards, Scrooge is doing a great deal of harm, especially to himself, by this kind of single-minded pursuit of material gain. But let's continue.
The question of how can more wealth be created, and what conditions would be necessary for accomplishing such ends, never enters their minds.
The um, the idea that some voluntary practices, quote unquote, might be unjust or even uncharitable, never enters the libertarian's mind.
For the pursuit of such conditions would utterly destroy all socialist systems. The beneficiaries of such redistribution are looked upon as passive and dependent recipients of other people's decision-making. In this connection, it is to Mr. Cratchit that I would now like to direct my attention. The central character in this campaign of terror and extortion against my client is one Bob Cratchit, the 19th century's version of Forrest Gump, a witless and chronic loser with no apparent control over any significant aspects of his life, save perhaps for his body's biological functions. Apparently his only purpose in life is to absorb the blows visited upon him by others. He is the poster boy for victimhood, a flatliner devoid of any dynamic sense of life. At this point, many of you are probably thinking to yourselves, surely he's not going to denounce the Cratchits, is he? They are one of the most revered of all families, a part of the pantheon of secular gods in our culture.
Charles Dickens was a Christian. This is a very Christian view. And, oh gosh. What are we going to worship? Should we rather worship the secular saints, like, I don't know, the main characters of Fountainhead? I mean, I know that the Mises Institute often treats people like F.A. Hayek and Murray Rothbard as a kind of with a kind this kind of saint-like figure, this kind of saint-like glow. Even libertarian Catholics have this high esteem for a man who said some pretty outrageous things, and did not and acted in a way that was very unbecoming of someone of his social stature. I mean, if you want to read about the controversies that Murray Rothbard got into, he was this giant contrarian who would always cheer on the enemies of the United States military wherever they went, to the point where he was cheering as the communists took over Vietnam. So yeah, he was a piece of work. Um, and so if you are a secularist and you want a saint, you can't do uh, you can't do I mean, the Cratchits are not a bad choice. Yeah, they're everything about them is very wholesome, and of course, this guy has to disparage the Cratchits as for what reason? Why? Because they're poor? Because because Bob Cratchit has a bad job? Unbelievable.
Yes, I am. I am going to attack the Cratchits.
Oh my. How stunning and brave.
One of the offences with which my client has been charged was that he had not paid Bob Cratchit a large enough salary. Cratchit has allegedly been underpaid, whatever that may mean, by my client.
It means that you haven't been given your. It means that Bob Cratchit hasn't been given a just wage. He hasn't been given a wage that matches the value of his work. He hasn't been given a wage that can adequately provide for his family. That's what it means. It's this isn't a difficult concept, but to the libertarian mind, any wage an employer gives his employee, if it's part of a quote unquote voluntary contract, it's acceptable, totally acceptable, which leaves room open for all kinds of exploitation, and I mean up to and including all kinds of nonsense. It's I mean, libertarianism is very much self-defeating in that respect. And you could, uh, and you can, I mean, you could, under libertarianism, you could get into a voluntary contract with somebody and say, all right, I'm going to sign this voluntary contract with you. If I get to eat you, if you eat me, you can cut up, I will give you permission to cut up my body and eat me whole. Because and this actually because this and I'm not making this up. This actually did happen. I think in one of the in Europe once. There was a case where a guy with a fetish for being eaten met with another guy who was a cannibal, and they signed a contract giving this guy a permission to kill him, carve up his body, and eat him. All right, and this was considered. I mean, the in the court. I mean, the court found of obviously the court punished the cannibal in this case because Europe still had an inkling of sanity. But there's nothing wrong with that from a libertarian perspective. I mean, it's his life, it's his body, his choice. What's wrong with it? It's his body, his choice. But that contract, that's not, that particular contract is not acceptable for whatever reason. And yet, paying people so little that they cannot provide for their adequately for their family, that's perfectly fine. Again, this is another issue with the libertarians. They have this definition of voluntary, and they have a definition of voluntary and a definition of harm that allows for an actual injustice to occur. Not least, and that's not even speaking of the lack of charity, the lack of goodwill towards men. That is specifically a Christian virtue. Now let's continue.
For many years. Why? Why did he not quit? Why didn't he go to work for some other employer? Perhaps one of the politically correct businessmen who periodically show up at Scrooge's office to solicit and browbeat charitable contributions from my client.
Oh, but browbeat, like he was. They just came in and asked him. Oh, the whole cannibalism thing was in Germany, according to ZS. I'll have to check into that. But anyway, can you hear this? They were. He claimed that they were browbeating. He was. They were trying to convince him, and then when Scrooge said no, they left. Like, oh my goodness, it's it's unreal how they. I mean, the libertarians don't even read the same book. They're just. I wouldn't be surprised if the person who wrote this essay even has even read the original novel, is just going off of a kind of meme view of a kind of medic view of A Christmas Carol that is just in his head. And I did read the novel in preparation for this stream. So yeah.
Put yourself in Cratchit's position. Imagine yourself to have been the victim of years of underappreciated and underpaid work, head of a large family, one of whose members suffered from a life-threatening ailment. What would you have done? Would you have simply sat around in a stupor, hoping that great fortune would befall you through some act of dumb luck? Certainly in the early days of the Industrial Revolution, wherein Dickens wrote, when new businesses were starting up all over the place in a great burst of economic creativity, there must have been all sorts of opportunities available for a competent bookkeeper. Great fortunes were made by those who rose up out of abject poverty. Such men as Andrew Carnegie come to mind, a young boy who went from seeing his father begging in the streets for work to become the richest man of his era. At no time in history had there been a greater opportunity for self-betterment than during the Industrial Revolution.
Oh boy. Okay. So if I'm going to, uh, yeah, we're talking about a kind of rags to riches story for Andrew Carnegie. And this is the kind of libertarian fantasy that all rags that anybody can just become next Andrew Carnegie. They just pull themselves up by their bootstraps. But the thing is, there's a great deal, even in this kind of perfect free market, there's a great deal of luck involved in this. There's a great deal of it's also a matter of connections of who knows who, and that in providing those opportunities. Are there certain virtues associated with great amounts of wealth? Yes, there are. And no doubt, Andrew Carnegie had some of those virtues, which is why he rose from his humble beginnings to becoming a great man of industry. But that wasn't something necessary. That there were a number of contingent factors playing into that caused Carnegie to rise. So it's not a given that Bob Cratchit is going to have all the economic opportunity in the world, especially if I mean if for all we know, Scrooge, as terrible as he is the best option available, and he still is bad, which says a lot about the how bad Victorian England was with treating the poor, which is one of the things that Charles Dickens was trying to critique in his works. He was trying to critique this kind of social stratification, cla- this kind of class and this rise of bourgeois economics that was really that was creating all these social ills. And it's not as though these social ill. I mean, but the libertarian is going to claim, and he has to claim, that Bob Cratchit's circumstances are entirely his fault. I mean, we don't there when there's no indication of this. I mean, Bob Cratchit, he has a large family, yes, but so did most people at that time. More to the point, he had a child who had some kind of illness that who's I bet he had to pay for the I bet he had to pay for that. Um, he, but Bob Cratchit, he wasn't a man of vice. We don't see him smoking or drinking or engaging in gambling or any of these other social vices that could plausibly be used to blame his poverty on himself. But because Bob Cratchit doesn't have good job opportunities, that's somehow his fault.
Where demonstrated merit helped to destroy the state-conferred privileges of feudalism.
The state conferred privileges of feudalism. Is feudalism really that bad? I mean, okay, let me rewind that for a moment. What exactly destroyed the state conferred privileges of feudalism? Uh, let's go back.
During the Industrial Revolution, where demonstrated merit helped to destroy the state-conferred privileges of feudalism.
Demonstrated merit destroyed it destroyed feudalism. Demonstrated merit as a really. I mean, I remember reading in Chris Bond's work about how it was not demonstrated merit that destroyed feudalism, but the actions of monarchs using their political power to undermine the aristocracy and centralize more state control for themselves. Demonstrated merit.
To anyone with even the most rudimentary understanding of economics, two things should be clear. One, if, as has been alleged, my client is a tight-fisted, selfish man, he surely would not have paid Bob Cratchit a shilling more than his marginal productivity was worth to Scrooge's firm. And two, if Bob Cratchit was being woefully underpaid by my client, there must have been all kinds of alternative employment available to this man at higher salaries.
You do not know that, okay? That's not a guarantee. There has never been, the Victorian England wasn't this perfect free market. In fact, there has never been the libertarian perfect free market. So that's not a guarantee. More to the point, Bob Cratchit is a man with a family. He can't afford to go looking around for work and put his family's livelihood at risk. This is why people get trapped in dead end jobs all the time because because they have to trade off. Yes, they might be getting underpaid, but their entire they risk losing their entire livelihood if they go and look for other work. And it's yeah, I'm seeing this. This reminds me of people who criticize the character Cinderella for not leaving her stepmother. Yeah, exactly. It's it's exactly like that. I mean, yes, Bob Cratchit isn't. I mean, in this case, Bob Cratchit isn't a minor, but isn't a minor who's dependent on a parental figure. But he is in he is an employee who's dependent on his boss for his family's livelihood. And this is the entire reason why the Catholic Church teaches the necessity of a just wage, because it knows that the very possibility of feeding oneself depends solely on employers like Scrooge. And if you have a man with Scrooge's character, or at least Scrooge's character as he was at the beginning of the novel, then he's not going to, if he's this miserly fellow, then he's not going to then he has the opportunity to exploit his workers any which way, and the libertarian is just going to allow him to do that, because in the libertarian mind there's nothing inherently unjust about exploitation. It's not even exploitation because it's voluntary, you see. Moving on.
Cratchit cannot find more remunerative work, and if my client is paying him the maximum that he is marginally worth to his business, then Cratchit must be worth precisely what my client is paying him.
Citation needed.
Economic values are subjective, with prices for goods or services rising or falling on the basis of the combined preferences of market participants.
So if a group of people come together and they all collectively decide, hey, you know what? I think it's valuable to burn down everybody's houses. Um, did we create? Then is the value of the arsonist's work increased? No. You know why? Because you destroyed actual things. You destroyed actual wealth. Wealth isn't subjective. It's it, wealth is not subjective. It's a there are real tangible things that exist that you that are worth things independent of anybody's opinion of them.
It is this interplay of marketplace forces, which Dickens neither understands nor favours, coupled with Cratchit's passive, sluggish disposition when it comes to improving his marketable skills or opportunities, that accounts for Cratchit's condition in life.
No, it doesn't. It could also be a matter of, well, Cratchit, there aren't opportunities available to Cratchit.
My client should no more be expected to pay Cratchit more than his marketable skills merit than would Dickens have paid his stationer a higher than market price for his pen, ink, and paper, simply because the retailer needed more money.
Well, I mean, if Dickens, it's not a matter of simple need. It's a matter of a just wage. All right. Objectively speaking, your work is worth a certain amount, and if you're purposefully underpaying your worker for then you're not you are not doing a good job. And if your worker is is working for you 10 hours a week, 10-12 hours a week, and sorry, not 10-12 hours a week, 10-12 hours a day, for 5-6 days a week, and he is barely getting by, that's a sign that you're underpaying him, friend. It's not a matter of, oh, his industrial productivity is not worth this amount. I mean, you just said that the value is subjective. All right, all this marketplace. So what is this nonsense about the marginal worth not being enough? Is it objective or is it? Uh, is it objective or is it not? Answer me that.
Dickens's ignorance of basic economics would, if acted upon by Scrooge, have produced adverse consequences for Cratchit himself. Had Ebenezer chosen to pay a higher salary for the work being done by Cratchit, Scrooge would very likely have been able to attract employees whose higher marginal productivity might have earned Scrooge even greater profits, leaving Cratchit with no job and no income at all.
Wait,
Had
what?
Ebenezer chosen to pay a higher salary for the work being done by Cratchit, Scrooge would very likely have been able to attract employees whose higher marginal productivity might have earned Scrooge even greater profits, leaving Cratchit with no job and no income at all.
the way these people think, then, I mean, then don't then don't give away Cratchit's job to some newbie. I mean, that's not how businesses work. You don't just fire whoever is there and replace them with some newbie that you think is going to be successful because you rather it because you know how good the your old reliable worker is. You don't know how reliable the new person you're hiring is.
If there are employers out there prepared to pay Cratchit a higher wage than he is receiving from my client, then we must ask ourselves, did Bob Cratchit simply lack the ambition to seek higher paying employment? It would appear so.
How? I mean, all of this, keep in mind, all of this is based on the assumption that out there in the aether, there are just oodles of job opportunities all over the place for Bob Cratchit. And if Bob Cratchit can't find these job opportunities, well, it's his fault because he's just not worth very much as a human being.
At no time do we see this man exhibiting any interest in trying to better his and his family's lot. Not even when the aforementioned businessmen arrive for their annual shakedown of my client does Cratchit
Shaked. I'm going to continue. So, oh, it's so bad.
so much as suggest to them, "Gentlemen, I have a son who is afflicted with a life-threatening condition, and if you would be so inclined to look upon him as one of the objects of your charitable purposes, I would be greatly appreciative." He is unable to generate even the slightest motivation to rise from his self-pitying position long enough to even speak up for Tiny Tim, at a time when any responsible and loving parent would have jumped at the opportunity to plead his son's case.
You don't do that to people. I mean, those people were offering charity to those without homes in the winter. They were giving people, they were raising money for people who didn't have food and drink. Bob Cratchit might not be in the best circumstances, but he is still above those people. I mean, it seems like very shameless. It would be kind of shameless for Cratchit to do that, and yet Cratchit is um, Cratchit is somehow seen as being bad for not engaging in this shameful behavior. Just hey, by the way, since you're in the business of raising money for poor people, I'm poor, I guess. Could you give me money? What kind of person does that? It's like, I mean, I'll give them one thing. They certainly embody the Scrooge-like mindset. This author.
The prosecution, in the form of Mr. Dickens, would have you believe that my client is a heartless and irresponsible person.
uh, yeah, kinda.
But why should my client be more greatly motivated on behalf of Tiny Tim than was Tim's own father? Neither in this connection can we ignore the behaviour of Scrooge's nephew, who
Oh wow, Scrooge's nephew who came by and offered to and invited his uncle to to a Christmas party, and then the uncle responded by saying, anybody who by saying anybody who goes around with Merry Christmas on his lips should be executed, eh, and then says that and then ridicules the nephew for having married for love. And keep in mind, Scrooge also claims that his nephew is poor when his nephew has a very comfortable upper middle class existence, a wife and servants, and is able to throw these extravagant parties for his fellow socialites. It's Meanwhile, Scrooge, who the quote unquote rich guy, he lives in he lives in a very old, dirty, old, musty house. Barely provides for himself any, because he's so miserly that he wants to just keep piling on money, even at the expense of his own creature comforts. That's going the extra mile, because you'd think that someone with a lot of money would be very liberal in spending it, even if it's just on his own hedonistic pleasure. But Scrooge combines that kind of miserliness with that kind of miser. I mean, Scrooge's miserliness is so bad that he doesn't even spend it on himself. I mean, and that's supposed to be what Charles Dickens is trying to get at. That Scrooge is a profoundly unhappy person. Um, he doesn't take care of himself. He doesn't take care of others, and the two are connected, because, as I said earlier, human happy a part of human happiness requires charity. Um, I'm getting a comment from Cyrus the Great saying, "What do you think about the statement that I don't like? Freedom is the best thing you can give someone, so being selfish is good because it's the best way to preserve the freedom of how? There's no way that being selfish preserves the freedom of others. I mean, on its face, if I were to use other people for my own benefit, that's not freedom. All right. If I were to disrespect people, that's not that. How does that preserve the freedom of others? If I were to exploit people and using usurious practices and underpaying my employees, how is that preserving their freedom? That just seems like a really bad argument. Yeah, I guess if I were to steel man that argument, I would say don't. They're talking about not being a moral busybody, which, I guess you shouldn't be a moral busybody. You shouldn't just go around lecturing random people on the street. Hey, you should do this. Hey, you should do that. Yeah, that's not really what's happening here. We first see Scrooge's nephew coming in here and inviting his uncle to a Christmas party that he's having, and then he, and then you see two people ask for some money, and then Scrooge kind of brushes them off by saying that it'd be better if the poor people starved on the streets. So yeah, not great, not great.
Pops into the story early enough to chide his uncle for his miserly attitudes, and appears later at a lavish Christmas party fated for his yuppie friends. For all his sanctimonious rhetoric about caring for others, why were no gold coins forthcoming from the nephew's pockets on behalf of Tiny Tim?
Uh, uh, Gosh, we don't know it's just the point of the nephew is not simple. Okay, here's the thing, right? There's more to liberality than simply giving your money to poor people. That's part of giving your money away. There are other ways to spend your money, and this is the Bible actually says this. Um, there's a story in Scripture in the Gospels where Jesus to a per, goes to into one house, and he and his disciples are visiting, and this woman comes by and pours this very expensive perfume, and Judas, the traitor, the guy who would literally betray Jesus later on, scolds the woman, saying, "How dare you not sell that perfume and give it to the poor?" And Jesus defends the woman by saying, "Look, the poor will always be with us. There will always be poor people, but you won't have me always." And the point of this is that there are, yes, giving all you have to the poor is a virtue, and Jesus explicitly says that that would be a virtuous thing if you were to do that. But it's not the only virtuous thing to do. It's not even the most virtuous thing. Serving God is another way to be virtuous. Giving to the church, giving to your family is another way. I mean, the point of the nephew is to contrast Scrooge with the nephew, and say that, look, the nephew is also rich, but he's happier with his wealth because he uses it to benefit others. He throws these parties for his friends that and he plays all these games and has a lot of fun and food, and he wanted to share that fun with his uncle, who because his uncle he can see that his uncle is miserable all the time. And Scrooge is like, "No, I don't want to. Fun, blah, bah humbug." All right, yeah. So I'm getting Cyrus the Great say the libertarians say something like that: if anyone is selfish, starting with you with yourself, everyone is free, and if freedom is the best thing, God's gift, that's good. I don't agree with liberalism. I agree that they are wrong, but I want to know your arguments. It's difficult to understand the logic. Okay, so all right, so I'm going to break this down the best I can, right? The libertarian view is that if everybody pursued their personal self-interest, then through this grand coincidence that they call the invisible hand of the market, then it will somehow produce common goods. If we just ignored this kind of goes against this is very counterintuitive, and they justify this using economic trickery that they don't that I mean that most of them that most of them do not that most of them don't really understand. uh, I mean, the conditions for having this kind of absolute perfect free market are basically impossible to meet. So it's not. This isn't the case. This isn't the case in real life. But so that's one thing. Another thing is that when we're talking about people give pursuing their own personal self-interest, part of that self-interest inevitably includes the good of others because humans are social animals. They It inevitably includes the good of others in there. because because humans are social animals. They live in a community, and thus they need to contribute to a common good, a good for every a good goods that only as a community they can be achieved in order to fulfill their own good. And this is why pursuing private self-interest all the time isn't the path to happiness. Another thing to add to that is what was it? I was I had it on the tip of my tongue. Man, I had it on the tip of my tongue, but for some reason I totally forgot what I was going to say. Oh well, I'll continue, but I hope that answers your question, Cyrus.
We see in this nephew the forerunner of the modern politically correct limousine liberal, who has all kinds of plans for disposing of other people's money while carefully shepherding his own.
He's asking Scrooge to come to a party. Let's continue.
A man Mark Twain might have had in mind when he wrote of those who believe that there is nothing so needs reforming as other people's habits.
Yes, I mean, other people's habits do need reform. I mean, there's a lot of, I don't know if you've noticed, but there's a lot of evil in the world. I think a great deal of people would be happier if their habits were reformed. But of course, the libertarian is against that. Okay, well, I'm getting these text messages. I'm going to ignore them. Okay, so I'm going to continue.
If a lack of imagination and ambition is not at the crux of Bob Cratchit's problem in maintaining his inert status quo position for so many years, then perhaps we should consider the possibility that this man was simply incompetent. Perhaps he had tried but was unable to obtain more highly paid employment because he was incapable of performing at any higher skilled level than that of the bean counter he apparently was, and seemed satisfied in remaining. If Cratchit's stagnating in the backwaters of Scrooge's shop was due to his basically poor work skills, then the obvious question is, why did Cratchit not seek to enhance his skills, as by learning a more remunerative trade? Alas, Bob Cratchit was, once again, either too unambitious or too unimaginative to pursue this course of conduct.
The famous just learn to code, bro. Yeah, this is the famous learn to code, bro mentality. I think it's pretty obvious why just telling people out of hand, oh, just learn to code, learn to improve your skills, um, is kind of silly. It be I think there was all this there are all these people uh, who just keep doing these things. I mean, it'd be like telling somebody, "Hey, just become a professional athlete." Really? And what if the market doesn't see doesn't have a use for you? The quote unquote market doesn't have a use for you. What if your job gets replaced by a computer program or or perhaps an immigrant? And you are you going to Are you just going to starve on the streets? Uh, Questions. But libertarians don't want to really answer those tough questions because um, they're very it's very lucrative to ignore them. Let's say I'm going to continue this for a little bit longer, and then we're going to stop. I think we've heard just about enough of this. Uh, in fact, let's skip over. Um, let's skip more towards.
ambition, and love for his
Okay, so Bishan. So let's.
this slug. He stands condemned for not paying him more than he was marginally worth, more than any other employer would have paid him, if indeed any other employer would have hired him in the first place.
Okay, so he's still bad mouthing Cratchit. Okay, continue.
Spirits, who trespass, but a tool used by the conspirators. The morally culpable wrongdoers in this shakedown of my client are the spirits, who trespass at night upon the quiet enjoyment of my client's premises to terrify him with previews of his own demise should he not succumb to their demands to part with his money.
Scrooge is going to die no matter what. He's an old man. What the ghost of Christmas yet to come showed Scrooge is that in his death, all these bad things would happen. He build up. He understands. Scrooge had built up all this wealth in the hopes of preventing himself from ever falling into poverty. But at the end, he built up all this wealth, and now it's just built there, doing nothing. He had no heirs. He had no will. All of everything he had, was scattered to the wind by vultures and scavengers. It's and In some adaptations, they depict him as going to hell. So uh, this is the this is the final point I guess I'll make about this is when Christians warn people about going to hell, it's not as though we want people to literally go to hell. Like, right? We don't say, okay, you're going to hell. Ha! Take that, liberal. No, that's not what we do. What we want is for people to know what the consequences of their actions are. All right? We sincerely believe, for independent reasons, that Christianity is true and that it teaches these lessons. And if people do not follow Christian morality and believe in Jesus, then there is a very good chance that they will wind up in the bad place. Okay, it'd be like and getting mad at people. I mean, let's give an analogy. If I were traveling down the road and Bob Marley were to come by and say, "Hey, by the way, I died when I went down that road because there's a bridge with a hole in it. So don't go down that bridge, or else you'll fall into that hole and die, just like me." Is that really a form of extortion? Is he trying to threaten me by is he trying to threaten me into leaving not going down that road? Is he doing so for his own personal gain? No. And it's kind of ridiculous to think that this is an extortion racket. I mean, who is doing the extortion? The ghosts aren't working for the ghosts aren't working for Cratchit. They're not working for the for The nephew, they're not working for the rich gentleman looking to get Scrooge's donations. They, yeah, I guess you could say they're working for God or for Charles Dickens. I guess, but Dickens isn't trying to get Scrooge's money for himself. He's trying to warn Scrooge to change his ways so that he voluntarily chooses to give to charity. Okay? So the whole premise of this quote unquote defense is, I mean, is ridiculous. I don't think I have to share anymore. I've been going at this for an hour and a half now, and I think we've seen enough. Man, I did not expect it to be that bad when I first saw this. I mean, I think I remember watching this a long time ago and thinking to myself, wow, this is bad. But man, I didn't remember it being this bad. I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to be heading out soon. Um, if you have any comments you want to leave behind, I'm free to answer questions. Okay, so we got recommended books on Western secular ideologies. For example, about liberalism being progressive and giving us freedom, about secularism being neutral and democracy was peaceful, and so on. Um, what are you talking about? Critiques of these secular ideologies or defenses of them? I mean, you have the works of. I mean, the if you if I were to give some works defending modern liberalism, I would recommend the authors like John Rawls, uh, eh, John Rawls, Hannah Arendt, Hannah Arendt, she Arendt, she and a lot of different other uh, political theorists. Um, they okay, no, not defending critics. Okay, John Rawls and Hannah Arendt are defenders of modern liberalism. You want critics, uh, some of the stuff at I mean, one of the best critiques of liberalism that I've seen is there's Chris A. Bond's book Nemesis, a Juvenalian the Juvenalian versus liberal understanding of human order. Um, Chris Bond's book Nemesis. Besides Nemesis, there's also the there are also other books written by there's the book for a critique of church and state separation. There's a book called the let's see, I think it was called Integralism, which defends the a more Christian view of politics. And I think that's written by Thomas Crean. And that's what I have off the top of my head. So Nemesis by Chris Bond and Integralism by Thomas Crean. I would also look at some of the books on scholastic ethics because they contain some great works on that area in that area. Um, yeah, so that's oh, I think there's also a book called The Church and the Libertarian, although I have not read that book. And it's supposed to be a refutation of it's it's supposed to be a refutation of libertarianism. Uh, from a Catholic perspective. So please check that out. Although I have not read it myself. All right. So that's all for today. I hope that you guys appreciated my stream, appreciated my ramblings, and I hope you had a good day. I'm going to have to move this to my raw takes instead of my interviews, unfortunately. All right. Thank you. Have a nice day.